The secret we forgot. Imagine this. It's the dead of winter. Your heater is blasting, yet you're still shivering. Now imagine your grandparents, without electricity, without insulation, without modern heating, sleeping warmer than you are right now. How is that even possible? What did they know that we completely forgot? For the next 15 seconds, remember this one chilling truth. Your ancestors could stay warm in storms that would shut down entire modern cities. And they did it using methods so simple, so brilliant, and so quietly powerful that modern science is only now catching up. Welcome to the overnight warmth rule grandparents never broke. Now picture the year 1692. The New England winter is roaring outside, ice creeping down the window panes, and a gust of wind so sharp it can snuff out a candle right inside your bedroom. There is no central heating humming in the background, no electric blanket waiting beneath the sheets, yet somehow, in this brutal cold, your ancestors slept in a steady, enveloping warmth that felt almost mystical. How did they do it? They followed a principle we've nearly abandoned in the modern age, a principle that kept entire generations alive through winters far harsher than anything we face today. They called it nothing, because to them it was obvious. But today we call it the overnight warmth rule. You see, in our modern world, we think of heat as something we consume. We turn a dial. We wait for the air to warm up. We try to heat the house. But our grandparents, they understood warmth as a resource, something you manage, store, trap, and preserve. They didn't waste energy heating empty space. They focused on something far more efficient and far more human, heating people, not places. And tonight on Historia Prime, we're stepping back into a world where survival depended on mastering the smallest details of comfort. We'll uncover the ingenious, sometimes dangerous, and surprisingly scientific tricks our ancestors used to build what modern researchers now call the microclimate. From copper warming pans tied to the darkest moments of the Salem Witch Trials, to the floor-heating genius of ancient Korea, to the wool secrets your grandmother swore by, you're about to learn that the old ways weren't primitive. They were engineered with breathtaking precision. So the real question is, are you ready to reclaim the comfort your ancestors never lost? Then let's begin, and unlock the rule they never broke. Part 1. The Gadgets of the Biological Hearth. To understand how our ancestors survived nights that would freeze most of us solid, we begin with the first phase of the overnight warmth rule, metabolic priming. They knew a truth we often forget. You must enter bed already warm. You have to light the biological hearth before you lie down. And nothing embodied this wisdom more than the 17th century warming pan. A polished copper or brass pan, long-handled, filled with glowing embers from the fireplace. This wasn't just a tool, it was a family treasure, a nightly ritual. A simple act that turned a freezing bed into a pocket of radiating heat. Families slid the warming pan between the sheets, charging the bedding the same way we charge a battery today. But even this cozy ritual carries a haunting story. One famous warming pan in the Rosenberg Library once belonged to John Proctor. Yes, the man executed in the Salem Witch Trials, a reminder that even in times of fear, accusation, and chaos, the human need for warmth remained constant and deeply personal. Of course, danger came with those glowing coals. 18th century doctors eventually warned families to use hot sand instead, safer, cleaner, and just as effective. And for large beds, innovation went even further. Enter the bedwagon, or the monk, a wooden arch placed beneath the blankets, allowing a pot of fuel to radiate heat without letting the fabric touch flame. A protective shell of warmth engineered long before safety standards existed. But if a family had no copper pans or wooden frames, they relied on the quiet hero of winter survival: soapstone. Dense, heat-hungry, capable of radiating warmth for 6 to 8 hours. wrapped in flannel and tucked at the foot of the bed, it became the 18th century equivalent of a high-capacity power bank. Through all these tools, pans, sand, wagons, stones, our ancestors practiced the same principle. Don't heat the room. Don't waste fuel. Prime the warmth where it matters most, your body's own microclimate. And this was only the beginning of the overnight warmth rule. Part 2. The Textile Fortress. Why wool is king. Now that the bed is primed and glowing with stored heat, we move into the second phase of the overnight warmth rule, something our grandparents mastered so instinctively that modern science is only now beginning to understand it. They built what I like to call the textile fortress, because once heat is created, survival depends on trapping it, and nothing traps warmth like wool. Wool isn't just fabric, it's a marvel of natural engineering. If you look closely at a single wool fiber, as magnified as a mountain chain, you'll see tiny crimped ridges twisting and bending like springs. This crimp creates millions of microscopic air pockets, each one a miniature vault of insulation. Synthetic blankets may feel soft, but they're smooth, airtight, and often suffocating. They trap moisture, make you sweat, and then, cruelly, rob you of heat the moment that moisture cools. But wool behaves differently. This is where the true magic begins. Wool performs an almost alchemical trick known as the heat absorption. When wool absorbs moisture vapor, your sweat, your breath, even the humidity in your room, it triggers a microscopic chemical reaction that releases heat. Not traps it, not steals it, releases it. 1 kilogram of merino wool can generate as much warmth over 8 hours as an electric blanket on low. Your grandparents didn't have the term heat absorption, but they understood the experience. Wool kept you warm even when the room was freezing. Wool kept you dry even when you perspired. Wool kept you alive, and that mattered because not every fabric was so forgiving. In the colonial era, there was a saying whispered with a seriousness that sounds dramatic today. Cotton kills in the cold. Cotton absorbs moisture like a sponge. Once wet, it collapses, clings to the skin, and draws heat away from the body like an icy hand. Wool, on the other hand, can hold nearly a third of its weight in moisture without feeling damp at all. The fiber structure lifts moisture away from your skin, locks it into its core, and continues producing gentle warmth as it works. That's why frontier families, Arctic explorers, shepherds on wind-cut hills, they all trusted wool with their lives. And now let me ask you something. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, feeling clammy, chilled, or just inexplicably uncomfortable, even though your blanket felt cozy when you first got into bed? That's not you. That's your modern bedding failing the overnight warmth rule. Maybe, just maybe, the key to your deepest, warmest, most restorative sleep isn't another gadget or a higher thermostat setting. Maybe it's the same wisdom your grandparents practiced every single night. Return to natural fibers, build your own textile fortress, and let wool do what it has done for thousands of winters. Keep the warmth where it belongs. Part 3. The Architecture of Sleep. A room within a room. Now that we've explored how our ancestors primed warmth and trapped warmth, we move into the third phase of the overnight warmth rule, one of the most ingenious and visually striking solutions ever invented. This phase shifts from what you wear to where you sleep. It is the silent masterpiece of ancestral engineering, the architecture of sleep. And at the heart of that architecture stands the canopy bed. Today we think of canopy beds as symbols of luxury ornate posts, flowing curtains, something you'd expect in palaces or storybooks. But historically, the canopy bed was born not from vanity, but from raw necessity. In medieval castles, in drafty colonial homes, and in cabins where the walls rattled under winter winds, a canopy bed became a room within a room. Families didn't try to heat the entire chamber. They simply enclosed the small area where warmth mattered most. Imagine heavy curtains of velvet or wool being drawn shut at night. With one simple movement, the sleeper created a sealed cocoon where body heat, breath, and warmth were captured and recycled. Instead of rising into the rafters or vanishing through cracks in wooden walls, warmth swirled gently around the sleeper, forming a tiny, perfectly controlled microclimate. A microclimate so efficient, modern thermal engineers still study this principle today. This was what people sometimes called the cozy box, a soft-walled shelter that turned even a freezing room into a pocket of comfort, a greenhouse of human warmth. But the canopy bed did more than fight cold. In the 16th and 17th centuries, many families lived in shared halls. Privacy was scarce, noise was constant, drafts slipped through every seam in the house, and above, from thatched roofs, dust, insects, and debris could fall during the night. Bed curtains created the one protected sanctuary where a person could shut out the world and sleep in peace. And then there was the fear of the night air. People believed darkness carried sickness, that cold night breezes could seep into your body and cause disease. Though the belief was mistaken, the solution enclosing oneself behind thick, insulating curtains accidentally created one of the most effective survival strategies ever developed. By sealing in warmth while still allowing a hint of airflow, the canopy bed provided a delicate balance between insulation and breathability. What looked like furniture was actually thermal engineering. What looked like decoration was actually survival. And tonight, as you pull your modern duvet a little closer, remember this. Your ancestors weren't just surviving the cold, they were designing their own microclimate, one night at a time. Part 4. Global Masters of the Rule. As we move deeper into the overnight warmth rule, it becomes clear that this wisdom wasn't confined to Europe or early America. Across continents and climates, humanity discovered one universal truth. You don't need to heat the whole space. You only need to heat the people inside it. This was global survival engineering at its finest, and each culture perfected its own version of spatial optimization. Let's begin in Korea, where one of the most brilliant heating systems in human history was born, the ondol, or baked stone floor. Thousands of years ago, Koreans channeled the smoke and heat from the kitchen fire through a network of stone-lined flues beneath the floor. These stones absorbed the heat all day long, turning the entire floor into a massive thermal battery. When night fell, that stored warmth radiated gently upward, creating a perfectly even blanket of heat without a single flickering flame in the room. It's the reason Koreans traditionally sat, ate, and even slept directly on the floor. Because in a Korean home, the floor was the warmest, safest, most comfortable place in the entire house. The system worked so well that when American architect Frank Lloyd Wright experienced it firsthand, he became obsessed and helped introduce radiant floor heating to the modern West. Meanwhile, in Japan, an equally ingenious idea emerged: the kotatsu. Imagine a low wooden table with a heat source beneath it, covered by a thick quilt. Families gathered with their legs tucked underneath, sharing one efficient heat source rather than burning fuel to warm the entire room. The kotatsu didn't just warm bodies, it created a social hearth, drawing people together in the coldest months. And thousands of miles away in Afghanistan, a similar innovation took shape in the Korsi, a central heat pit under a heavy blanket that acted as the beating heart of the home during winter. Whether in the mountains of Central Asia or the snowy plains of Japan, these cultures embraced the same principle. Warm the people, not the room, not the air, the people. All these systems, Korean ondol, Japanese kotatsu, Afghan Korsi, prove the same point our grandparents intuitively understood. The smartest heating is targeted heating. Efficient, localized, human-centered. As you sit in your modern home today, with vents humming and thermostats glowing, it's worth asking, have we forgotten the very thing our ancestors mastered? Not the technology, but the wisdom of using heat with purpose, precision, and respect for how the human body actually interacts with warmth. Because around the world, for thousands of years, humanity followed the overnight warmth rule and lived through winters we can barely imagine today. Part 5. Modern Science. The 3 microclimates. At this point, you might be wondering, all of this old world wisdom sounds fascinating, but I live in an apartment in 2024. How does any of this help me tonight? Here's the twist. Modern sleep science has finally proven that our grandparents without labs, without gadgets, without thermal imaging were absolutely right. Their instincts perfectly align with what researchers now call the 3 microclimates. And understanding these 3 layers can completely transform the way you sleep. Because to fall into deep, restorative rest, your body must lower its core temperature by about 1 degree. If the air around you is too warm, too humid, or too stagnant, your heart rate rises, your sleep fragments, and you wake feeling tired, even after 8 hours in bed. So let's break down the science hidden beneath your blankets. The first layer is the mattress skin microclimate. This is the zone where heat and humidity accumulate the fastest. When this layer overheats, your entire body struggles to regulate temperature. Our ancestors solved this effortlessly. They used wool mattress pads, not for softness, but because wool breathes, insulates, and wicks moisture away. It kept that critical first layer dry and stable long before the term microclimate even existed. Next comes the pajama skin microclimate, which researchers now consider the most influential layer of all. This is the layer that touches your body directly and regulates everything from humidity to thermal comfort. Loose-fitting garments made from natural fibers, linen, cotton flannel, and especially wool, allow your skin to balance heat the way nature intended. Synthetic fabrics, no matter how cozy they feel at first touch, trap moisture, spike your temperature, and break the overnight warmth rule instantly. And then we arrive at the final shell, the skin duvet microclimate, your thermal cocoon. Science tells us that the perfect temperature inside this layer is between 31 and 34 degrees Celsius. Too much heat and you sweat. Too little and you shiver. A properly layered wool blanket doesn't just insulate you, it buffers you, stabilizing temperature like a living thermostat. Now think about this. Your grandmother didn't study thermal physiology. She didn't read peer-reviewed sleep papers. She simply used wool blankets, flannel pajamas, and cracked her bedroom window open just a little to keep the macroclimate cool. Without knowing it, she was architecting the exact sleep environment that modern researchers now recommend. 3 microclimates, 3 layers of ancient wisdom, and the realization that perfect sleep has nothing to do with heating the entire house, and everything to do with mastering the tiny world that exists just millimeters from your skin. This is the overnight warmth rule brought into modern science, and soon into your own bedroom. Conclusion: bringing the rule home. And now, as we come to the end of this journey, from warming pans to wool fortresses, from canopy beds to Korean stone floors, you may realize something surprising. The overnight warmth rule isn't just a relic of the past. It's a blueprint we can still use tonight, in our modern homes, with our modern comforts, to sleep warmer, deeper, and far more naturally than we do now. So what can we actually learn from this forgotten rule? First, stop trying to heat your entire home to 75 degrees all night long. It drains your wallet, harms the planet, and, most importantly, it works against the biology of healthy sleep. Our ancestors weren't weak or primitive. They were efficient. They understood that warmth doesn't come from filling a room with hot air. It comes from focusing heat exactly where it's needed. Heat the person, not the place. That ancient philosophy is still the most effective system we have. And applying it today is surprisingly simple. You can start by investing in a good wool blanket, something with real weight and breathability. You can try priming your biological hearth with a warm bath or even a cup of golden milk, turmeric, nutmeg, and warmth working together to signal your body that it's time to wind down. And then you build your microclimates, layer by layer. Let the air around you stay cool. Let your blankets do the insulating. Let your body settle into that perfectly balanced cocoon your grandparents crafted every single night without ever using the word science. Because when you follow the overnight warmth rule, you're not just staying warm, you're training your body to become more resilient. You're activating brown fat, strengthening your internal thermostat, and cultivating the kind of calm, restorative sleep that modern life quietly steals from us. Our ancestors survived winters that would shut down whole cities today. They did it without switches, without oil furnaces, and without climate-controlled bedrooms. They did it through ingenuity, resourcefulness, and a profound understanding of how the human body holds on to heat. So now the question is, which part of the rule will you bring home tonight? Will you try wool? Will you try a warming ritual? Or will you experiment with building your own tiny microclimate inside your blankets? Share your experience in the comments. We always love hearing what you discover. Thank you for watching Historia Prime. And remember, the past isn't just a timeline, it's a manual for living wiser, warmer, and better today. Before you go, hold this one image in your mind. Your body is a biological hearth. Modern heating tries to warm an entire forest just to keep that one fire alive. But ancestral heating, the overnight warmth rule, creates a small stone-lined pit, protects it, shelters it, and wraps the flame in exactly what it needs. It's not about how much fuel you burn. It's about how well you keep the glow.